our meeting to order. This is a workshop. So let's start with roll call, please.
Mr. Cuddy,
Here.
Mr. Crowe, Mr. Holt.
So here, so Mr. Crowe is not here.
Yes. Ms. Jacobs is
Yes.
Ms. Lewis.
She resigned.
Oh, yes, that's correct. Mr. Morse,
Present.
Paul,
Oh. Here.
that's you. Mr. Rockwell.
Here.
Charlie Wood.
All right, now we accept a motion on the adoption of the agenda.
Make a motion to adopt the agenda?
Second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Jump right into business discussion items. And we have the UAB work plan review, which is draft energy policy. You are UAB work plan. Are you going to lead this?
Yeah, so I wanted to kick off by sharing two things and then looking at the work plan that Christine just brought up. So I wanted to share with you all that when we talked about Ms. Lewis not being on the committee anymore, the city commission meeting with city commissioners over the last kind of week or so, they are leading a discussion about subcommittees for the city commission. So there's different models that the commission has used over the years. We currently just have our main commission meetings, then we have what's called a general policy committee. And then there's a whole bunch of different committees that are joint committees with the county and other entities. There's the finance committee and the audit committee. What the commission has been talking about is potentially going back to a subcommittee model, which was prior to, I think, 2016. And the subcommittee model would be basically they would have, I can't remember all of them, they'd be like 6 subcommittees. And one of those subcommittees would be utilities. And so in that discussion, I just wanted to share with you, there has been no action taken, but a talk of that may include somehow blending the UAB with that subcommittee, like taking members from the UAB and putting them on that subcommittee and dissolving the utility advisory board as part of that. So the reason I'm sharing all of that is their recommendation has been not to move forward with replacing Ms. Lewis at this time. Didn't want to put someone new on here, and then 3 months later, the committee, UAB doesn't exist anymore.
When you say blend?
Well, it's not blend. They would create a subcommittee. We used to have what was called a Regional Utilities Committee, RUC. And so they're talking about creating that, but then putting some non-voting members on there that are not commissioners. So the subcommittees are all commissioners. They're all city commissioners. It's a subset of all the full commission. But there's what they were talking about for the Regional Utilities Committee or the Utilities Committee, they will have 1 or 2 non-voting members that are non-commissioner. And so it would be like someone from this, could be, it doesn't have to be, but it could be someone from the Utility Advisory Board. But if they move in that direction, the discussion is to like dissolve the Utility Advisory Board and just have that be the central place where utilities are talked about. And then they would have like a Public Works Board. They would, they'd have 6 different kind of topic general areas. So I just wanted to share that, and let me kind of talk about process. So this has been discussed at a general policy committee meeting. Again, no action taken. What they're doing now is, this is my understanding of what they're going to do. Over the next month or so, they're going to come up with a recommendation of this. They've asked the charters to weigh in on different, like what the rules should be and different things. And so we have met a couple of times about what that would look like. But what their plan is to make a before the end of the year, to make a recommendation to the new commission coming in January, and then the new commission decide what to do. So nothing will change until, at the earliest, late January or February or something like that. But I just wanted you to be aware that, so they do not want to, their direction has been to not fill the seat of Miss Lewis. And then again, they're kind of talking this out over the next month or two.
Very interesting. Okay.
So sorry about to put that lead in, but I wanted to make sure that you all knew that was happening.
So that would require an ordinance change, is that correct? At least as far as the UAB is concerned, because
Yeah.
we're in by ordinance, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
so there, and just so, I'm obviously talking about the utility advisory board a lot. There are other committees that the same thing. They would dissolve through ordinance changes, other committees with a focus on these 6 committees. And I can provide, if we want, like at the next meeting, I can give you more information. It's just, we don't really know, I don't really know where it's headed or what's gonna happen. And like I said, and it probably will not really happen until January or February. Okay, so sorry with that introduction, that unagendaed item,
Good news?
yeah. What we have up here is, again, it's your all's work plan. And so you all, with this, deciding kind of what's on there. And then I think one big thing we sort of need to talk about today, that's an immediate thing, is what do we want to have on the agenda for the 10th, November 10th? We don't really have anything right now planned for that. And particularly from a staff perspective, kind of need to know what are we focusing on going forward. So one item that we could, when I looked at the list, there's one item I could really give an update on, which is the home energy scores. It's at the very bottom, Christine, or the second to the bottom. It's something I believe Member Folks brought up about how we utilize when we do assessment of homes, when we do energy surveys, kind of how we do that and aligning that with what the housing department does in general government. And so we can give an update on that. We're still looking at what that entails in terms of training of our people and the resources to do that. But by the 10th, we can give an update on that, as well as sort of an update just on the year. How many energy surveys did we do? What did we find? What are the pre-post results? As well as we can do the same thing with leak. So energy surveys as well as leak. How many homes did we end up impacting? What did we do? And what was the benefit of that? So that's an item that I think we can be prepared to give an update next week or on the 10th. The other thing I just want to share on the bottom one about EVs, we are establishing, I think we're calling it an electric vehicle steering group, or they call it steering committee. So that'll be between GRU folks and folks in general government that we're kind of putting together, answering questions like, how should our fleet convert to EVs? Should we have charging stations? Should we have charging stations for city vehicles? Should we have charging stations for the public? What does that look like moving forward? And so we're doing this sort of cross-functional team. That team is just kicking off. So I don't think there's too much to share on that at this time, but what we're hoping is by early spring, we'll kind of have some information on the EVs. So maybe what we could put on there, Christine, is just early spring might be a time that we can agenda something with the EVs. And then the last thing that I'll share from this list is, I'll do 2 things. IRP, we're finalizing the public engagement part of that now, where it's probably to kick off for the end of the year or maybe for the first of next year in January. So there's nothing really to do now, but there will be a lot coming next year, beginning next year. And then the last thing I'll just share is the UAP energy policy for us to kind of talk about that tonight and what the path is. This may drive several future agendas, kind of how we proceed with that. So that's all I have. So you all ask questions or determine what direction you all go in.
All right, well, let's just kind of go down the list. Well, what I wanted to jump to, kind of looking to Jason, I know you had thoughts and input on this, the environmental justice presentation. So, because in here, there's a, I don't know if you read this, it
Yep.
talks about Carla not being here and, you know, there's gonna be a presentation. It's like, what are your thoughts on for?
I was going to ask that we hold that on our agenda, our work plan for just maybe another month or two. Because there is another community group that's expressed some interest in working with us on that. And also, I mean, depending on how the commission races go, I've heard from at least one commissioner that would really like to hear something from this group on that topic. And so if we could just keep that on there for another month or so, and then we can reassess, if that's okay with folks.
So any thoughts on the, before we jump into on this, the November meeting? So far, I've heard one item on the agenda at this point.
You're saying to delay it a little bit, is that what you're saying?
The environmental justice, correct. Because
Or
yeah,
delay removing it.
delay removing it, correct. So we'll leave it on the work plan for another just couple months. And then we'll kind of, if we haven't made any progress in a couple months, then we can talk about taking it off. But I want a chance to hear from this other community group to see if they're gonna step forward and work with us. And of course, how the commission races go, if they're interested in hearing suggestion.
All right, any other thoughts for the November meeting that we?
That's just real quick, because Christine and I talked about this before the meeting. She's gonna be trying to capture sort of the discussion and where we are on here. So if everybody can kind of like give thumbs up or want something different during the meeting, just don't yell at Christine, but let her know we want to do something a little different, so that this kind of becomes what, you know, the action you want to move forward.
Well, maybe what we'll do is we'll start at the top. If anyone has any other thoughts? So the IRP sounds like that's going to be coming up. The solar curtailment, are we done with solar curtailment at this point? Ready to move that one?
So I think that can be removed.
That recommendation,
Came from here to the city commission approved it. And yeah, there's no more action.
Just for fun, let's talk natural gas rebates. Topic. So after the last meeting, talked to Tony for a little bit after the meeting, thought about it over the weekend. And I asked Robin, I said, did you already submit that to the city? She said, no, she hadn't. So Tony and I are scheduled to meet on Friday. I'm taking some of Michael Porter's stuff, you know, and because I didn't want to just send it forward. Here's a recommendation. I wanted to have a good backup. So I guess I'm looking for input for you guys, and I'm going to discuss with Tony what we're saying. What does he agree with? What does he disagree with? What's, you know, what do you guys want? I mean, I can do a write-up to go with it and submit it to the committee or to the city commission. I can bring it back to you guys. I can, what's your choice?
we voted, it was a pretty straightforward motion. I mean, I'm planning on writing a personal letter myself, but I would certainly welcome you as the chair to sort of summarize the arguments and the recommendation personally.
It was more about, do you guys want to see it before I send it forward? What I would submit with it. I'm fine. Oh, I'm fine doing it. I'm fine if you guys want to look at it.
The standard procedure would be to have us all look at it before it goes to the head high honchos.
Most of the, you know, and I'm fine with that. Most of the time we haven't, you know, when we've made recommendations to the board, you know, either the chair or the person making the recommendation or who, you know, created the motion, send something forward. But if, you know, this is a little different one. So if you guys want to look at what I'm saying first, now to do that, obviously I could send it out and have it redistributed, but we can't discuss it outside of meeting.
Mr. Chair, can I just say, so I think we've done it a couple of ways. So one is just a motion, as Member Foltz said, like, so what we do is in the agenda item with the city commission, we will put the motion that was approved by the UAB. It's whatever that language is. So a couple of sentences or whatever it is. Solar discussion, you all drafted a memo I'll approve that memo so that it kind of gave more backup to them. So when I go to take the item to the city commission, I'm going to address the motion. Like, let's say you don't do anything. I would say, okay, well, there was a motion made. Here's what the motion is. I may try to characterize a little bit more of the discussion, but I'm going to lean mostly on what the motion is. If you all want more backup, it's probably a good idea to have something that kind of talks about that, because I don't want to try to carry the water with that and misrepresent anything. So that's why I would lean more just on the motion language. But then, as you all know, we had this discussion, like, so as a general manager, I'm gonna take a recommendation that may be different than the motion, but clearly say, here's what the UAB's perspective was. So I just want to give that overall thing. So it's really up to you if you want to add more information or backup. But if you're going to do that as the utility advisory board, I'd probably say you want to make a motion, you want to approve it, whatever that is. Or if something just comes from you as the chair, that this is your summary of the item.
Go ahead.
Yeah, with the solar curtailment, I mean, essentially what the board did was to say, to basically empower me to work with GRU staff to make that statement to the commission. So, I mean, I'm happy if folks want to revisit it personally, but I'm also happy to just empower you as the chair to summarize the discussion and the perspective that was discussed here and pass it on to the commission.
And I guess, again, fine, coming back to you, I'm a little concerned about the timing, especially with the little bombshell we had there. I mean, I can write it as me. So, you would write your own, or else I'm just thinking, if I wrote something, I would, if you guys want to look at it before it went out, logistically, I could send it out at any time. And then we would have to discuss it at the next meeting.
Take an action, yeah, I think we'd have to do it at the November 10th meeting. And just to give you, so I think there's time to do that. Give you the perspective, we're shooting for probably going to the December 1st meeting. There's a December 1st commission meeting and a December 15th, but this December 15th is a farewell to old commissioners. There's nothing that else can go on the agenda. So it's December. So the real options really are December 1st, or we call a special meeting for this topic. Or if we don't do it this year, just so we all know the timing, then you have a whole new commission coming in January that we would be talking to. And so I think right now we're on the path probably toward going to the December 1st meeting.
So I would say, go to the commission with the motion that we had it. If somebody wants to do a pro argument, write up, and then a con if somebody wants to, and I would just say, because there was some discussion both ways, right? And then I would just use individual letters and just move on with that. I don't think we need a unified letter, because I think there was enough diverse opinions that.
Yep, I think that's probably, I can write a letter that we don't have to have a pro and a con. It's, if everybody wants to write something, everyone can write something. If one or two of us.
I trust you to hit all the bullet points.
Okay. I mean, somebody I do want to, I didn't see Wendell Porter's email before the meeting, unfortunately, and he had some really interesting points, and I'm going to be discussing with Tony, especially some of his on the potential limited financial implications of the rebates. I'll be interested to hear the GRU perspective of that, because he was talking thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. So I'll have to see what it is. So I think what I'm hearing is we'll just write stuff, send it along. Is everyone good with that? It's most, and if you feel, I know John, you came out against it, and so you were welcome to say what.
So go ahead.
I appreciate. I appreciate we're not unanimous. I've been wanting to ask you this, but I didn't feel like I could ask you outside of the meeting because we've been voting on stuff related to it. You mentioned, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, FP&L's work to develop hydrogen outside of electrolysis and how that might be a solution, because I've been feeling fairly negative on the idea that we're going to I would love to have
I
it.
just
happen.
know what I've read, and I have talked to the director down there one time. She says they do have pilots running right now. What do you call it? But that was a short conversation.
Where they can.
Think that, what do you call it, hydrogen does have a life somewhere there. I don't know exactly where it's going to be, but I do know that, there was a lot of movement for Mitsubishi down here to make power plants run at 100%. What do you call it, hydrogen?
Right.
And they're still working on that. What do you call it? And they're working with the people in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
What do you call it? Where they're going to ship some hydrogen, which was going to be made in Utah, stored in those caverns, and then piped over to LA to be used at 30%. What do you call it? Burned in the thing. So it's real.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I was saying, that you can't dismiss it and say it ain't going to be here, because people are really working on it.
Yeah, I guess my question, and is that because if you can efficiently, because the problem with electrolysis is just not very efficient. If you can efficiently convert solar electricity, hydro, whatever it is, that's something you can store, that's something you can move. That's my concern. It's one thing to say you can do it, it's another thing to do it.
The DOE has it out there, single shot. You go down to $1 per kilowatt, per kilogram. It's running up around $3 or $4 now. What do you call it? And they have a target for that, and they've got a whole bunch of people, and they're throwing a ton of damn money at it. It gets down to $1. It's competitive with all the other ways you can make hydrogen. Because you can make it, from gas or from coal, or from all the rest of them. If it gets down to $1 or down $2, then it's competitive.
I would love to have that happen. And I don't know if I mentioned this last time I was in Morocco, that they're building solar fields in Morocco for use in England. That's 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
They can run cables under the ocean for 1,000. And they talk about not being able to move power around. No.
HVDC,
I'm sorry,
are you using HVDC?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
There's a lot of federal energy research dollars in hydrogen. And in a place like Gainesville, where you have so many professors who would love to be on research projects, it's real possible to get pilot projects, research projects in conjunction with the University of Florida to do some pretty creative things.
Yeah. I've worked on methane plants and stuff in the past, and some of that stuff. It's just, I know the challenge of them too. So again, would love to have it happen. We'll see. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. So we talked natural gas, conservation rebates. In general, we were asked to discuss.
Yeah, I think so. What we've talked about is kind of tying to the end of the IRP, sort of the concept of the conservation rebates, really because of the tie to demand side management. So we'll be addressing demand side management in the IRP. And so having that discussion on conservation rebates when we have that data and analysis as part of this. So it would be like later next year that we would address that.
And at some point prior to, along with, or after that conversation, I'd like to do a brief presentation of the UAB on the ACEEE, American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, which to me is a sort of go-to national organization on these issues. They release a scorecard every year that rates municipalities on how they're performing in that sector. And I think it would be really useful in terms of having that sort of bigger picture. And because my thing with the way it's been done here oftentimes has struck me as kind of scattershot, with the exception of something like LEAP, which is really clearly targeted at a particular demographic. Previous to that, when money was flush and we were just putting a lot of money into conservation in this community, it was just sort of all over the place. And so thinking about, what sort of metrics, what are the longer term goals, what are the big picture things we want to accomplish with energy and water efficiency, I think it would be nice to have that conversation as well.
And that's where I think it kind of ties into the demand side management discussion, how much of the future power are we going to be kind of balancing and all with demand side management and through conservation and all of that. We want that tied to metrics that we're measuring and goals that we're trying to attain. So.
Yeah, there's been some very, I was just reading some of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's gonna be $1,200 a year in tax credit you can get every year to do window upgrades, add insulation. So there's gonna be some, some stuff that's gonna tie in with that stuff, which is very exciting. Urban boundaries for extension. So,
Oh, yeah, it's good that one.
so again, and I think Tim helped me to understand this better. I think if you can. Yeah, well, my understanding is that they're asking, should the UAB be a group that groups would come to help decide, recommend whether to extend boundaries for particular projects? Is that the question?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it quite that way. I think what the city commission has asked is essentially we have, so the different utilities have different kind of rules. So like electric, we have electric service territory. That's just the boundary. It's negotiated with PSC. You can change it, but it takes a huge effort to change it. So it's not something that moves very often. Water and wastewater, from the city of Gainesville's perspective, there are no boundaries. Alachua County has an urban service cluster line or urban cluster line that basically is beyond the current, where all the current pipes are, at least a quarter of a mile. And what it is if you're going to extend, if development comes in and you're going to extend past that line, they either have to have a special exception to do that, or they actually have to have the line changed. So, there's a process you can go through the county to change the line. So that's for water and sewer. Gas doesn't have any boundaries or anything associated with it. Telecommunications doesn't have any boundaries. What the city commission was kind of exploring was, well, what if we put boundaries in, like not arbitrary, but kind of arbitrary, draw a line, and wherever that line is, if utilities are going to be extended beyond it, it has to go to the city commission for approval to do that. And so we've kind of explored that, what that looks like a little bit. We're looking at bringing something back. We just want to make sure we understand kind of all the pros and cons of that. The challenge with, just the process and what the process would look like. So we would bring that to you first, just like we do other items before the city commission, get your input on it. And then if that boundary is drawn, there'd be an ordinance that would basically say, if a development comes in and it's outside of that, they have to go to the city commission to get approval to extend past that or redraw that line.
So my misunderstanding would be, you're saying that so this would just be a normal, you guys approve it, but in the future, if a particular development, that would not go through the UAB.
Yeah, it would still go through the UAB, just like anything that goes to the city commission.
Got it.
Just like everything that goes to the city commission comes through the UAB. It has a relative utility. So
Okay,
it
would
still come to the UAB. Should this line be changed and extended, and then we would go to the city commission with that as well.
So, and this is something that the city commission specifically asked us
Correct.
to evaluate.
Yeah. So we may be able to do that at the December meeting. We may be prepared to do that. I'm not 100% sure, but that could be a goal that we're trying to bring that to the December meeting for a recommendation from the UAB.
Okay, yeah, that'd be good. So home energy scores.
That's the one I started with, that I think at the November 10th meeting, we can bring and have a discussion. We still have some work to do, but we got a couple of weeks. We can do that.
That's a question. Yeah. So if you're talking about sort of broadening that conversation a little bit more beyond just the home energy score and giving folks here a little bit more comprehensive picture of what GRU is doing in that arena, might it also be useful to at least talk briefly about the work that the CWC is doing, since that work is so heavily funded by GRU? And I think that not everybody here might be as familiar with that.
That's a good idea. Like, would you want to lead that, or could you?
I mean, I think what I would probably do would be I could reach out to somebody from the CWC and ask them if folks are interested in that. I think it's a big initiative that is largely or good part funded by GRU. And that I think if we're talking about conservation initiatives that GRU is sponsoring, it would be good to get folks up to speed on that as well.
And it's kind of been a good partnership where we we each fill in different gaps and holes of what we're doing, whether it's the LEAP or CWC or the energy surveys. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's a great kind of partnership and how all that works together.
CWC stand for?
Sorry, yeah, Community Weatherization Coalition.
So it's a primarily volunteer group that goes into homes and helps people learn about their energy uses, does some evaluation, does a little bit of work. You're a very good group.
Refers a lot of people to LEAP as well. I mean, I kind of think of it as sort of like a ambassador in some ways for GRU because it goes in first a lot of times and then refers people to programs like LEAP for further follow-up work.
Didn't we have a presentation on that a while back?
Yeah, a couple of people from CWC came in.
Tony, do you want to reach out to somebody? You'd like me to? Yeah, okay. They'll definitely come if you ask them.
If you ask them, they would.
Okay,
So
yeah, so what we'll do is we'll have presentation from CWC, we'll give a presentation on energy surveys and kind of what we do and what we've been able to accomplish. We'll do the same thing about LEAP. And then as part of that, we'll talk about the ability of us being able to do the home energy score when we go out and do energy surveys or LEAP evaluations, all of that. And again, I think that's the piece. I talked to some folks this morning about progress on this. Where are we? And I think we've made a little bit of progress, but we're going to need to make more before the meeting. We'll do that.
So then looking at EVs, I know a number of us have strong feelings about EVs and how that's going to fit in, but in my opinion, a lot of that fits in with the IRP and rebates and programs and.
Well, and I'll let Eric, so Eric had some stuff he had to get to. He was going to be a little bit late, which it wasn't too late. Good job, Eric. But I'll let Eric talk about when I talked a little bit about we're putting together a working group or a steering committee. Eric will lead that effort. So why don't you just talk a little bit about that and FMEA, little thing we had the other day.
So we've been talking about EVs internally, and really the discussion is, okay, well, what do we need to do and where do we need to go with that, right? So we had some internal discussions on what have we researched, what information do we have, where is the industry kind of going? And in conjunction with that, we hosted an EV roundtable, and basically what it was is all the municipalities in Florida, well, most of them, came together to Gainesville and kind of talked about what they were doing. There wasn't really an action item or an agenda or a deliverable from that meeting. It was more of, hey guys, what is everyone doing in this space? Is there places where we can collaborate and work together? Are there things that we all need to be focused on that, hey, we may not be aware of right now? So it was really a discussion on the whole EV industry, the expected growth, and some of the things that we could do as utilities to prepare for that. So out of that meeting, we basically came back and said, hey, we've talked about this and we've met before, but what we're going to do is put together kind of an EV, I'll call it a steering committee, but it'll be some folks from my group, sustainability here at the utility. We'll bring in a manager of fleet from the city side and start talking about, based on what we know, where we think we're going, what is going to be the best plan and policy going forward. So we'll be getting that group together, meeting on a more frequent basis, deciding if there's anyone else that needs to be there. And then at the end, the hopeful deliverable is I'm hesitant to call it a policy, but at least a guideline on where are we going as a city / utility, what are our goals going to be around EVs, and how do we think we're going to get there, right? And we need to upgrade our distribution system and make changes there. How do we start planning for that? So those are some of the questions we want to start answering.
So Eric and I actually talked today about, what's the timeline on this? What does this look like? And I think what I shared earlier is maybe end of March time period, sometime in the spring, there'll probably be some products that will be coming out. And I think that would be an appropriate time to bring that update to the UOB.
Yeah, I would encourage you to get UOB and community involvement in that. I think it'll be like Okay, I'll share. Here personally, I don't get very excited about putting a bunch of EV chargers around town. As someone who's driven EVs for the last 10 years. And I know there are plenty of people in the EV club that I associate with on a regular, but who have very different feelings about that. But to have someone from the public, if GRU says, oh, no, we're not doing that, it won't sell as well as if you get people from the public. And I think it's going to be a very changing world. I can just tell you, I was talking with a business in town who's getting a Ford Lightning. They expect their electricity usage to triple.
Wow.
It's 110 kilowatt hour battery. They're expecting to drain 75% of it every day, 5 days a week. One charge. So I think it's the impacts are going to be tremendous. It's hard to overstate.
During that roundtable, there are some projections, right? This is all projection at this point, but if everyone converts to an EV by 2050, they expect the increase to be the equivalent of the national energy use today.
Yeah.
So effectively doubling
Oh, yeah.
the energy use across the United States due to the switch to EVs, right? So that has a huge impact on generation, how much we need, where it comes from, the grid and the distribution of that. How do we plan? Do we incentivize private companies to put in, charging stations, and how do we do that, or what impact is that going to have? There's a lot of questions when you sit down and start answering or thinking about, okay, what is EV, what is EV growth, or when is it kicking in, and how do we manage it? So we're going to be doing a lot of work over the next 5-6 months, and a lot of it's just going to be research. Where in the world do we get all this information from, and how do we base our forecast and then
And not to go way down this rabbit hole, but I think there's just huge opportunity. GRU is always looking at, people are using less electricity in this, and all of a sudden we're looking at, and it's something we can control. We can incentivize. I think I shared this with Tony. I drive a Tesla. That if GRU had the slightest, I don't care, 1/100 of a cent kilowatt hour change in the charging, Tesla would put that into their system, and my car would automatically charge when you wanted it to charge. There's things we can do to make this your best friend of when do we want to get rid of power? Rather than we're all coming home at 5 o'clock and plugging in. And the loads are, I can't and I've shared this before, that a standard Tesla charging station pulls over 5 megawatts. Instantaneous. That's just a standard little 20 station, and they're getting bigger, and that's nowhere, with the explosion. And so we need to be able to control it in ways, and there may be huge opportunities for EV, vehicle to grid, win-win stuff that, again, get very excited about. But yeah, so we look forward to that. So the one I left off, I don't know if you guys noticed. I'm sorry, you want to say anything?
Well, just more about the EV. I'm also really interested in hearing more. So I'm curious, what is the plan for involving community members and stakeholders in this conversation? Because, for instance, I believe it's going to be right here on GRU property on November 19th. There's a group of folks from the community that are organizing a sort of public event just focused on EVs. And so I think there is a big group of people in the community that have a growing interest in this. So I'm just curious, especially if we're talking about sort of citywide recommendations beyond just what does GRU need to be doing? What is the plan for involving folks on that?
So it's great that you asked that question. We are doing a community outreach as a result of the IRP to try and engage the community. And there are some great ideas that have come out of that, right? And so we are looking at, I can't go into a lot of detail because all of that is we're still negotiating that part. But a lot of what we're looking at in outreach, we're going in with the mindset of not only how do we use it for the IRP, but how do we use this for future engagements on large products and large discussions that we want to have with the public, right? And so part of this discussion is how do we build it for the IRP, but how do we build a template we can use with other things? And so that would be the idea that we would use, right? Some of the engagement that would come out of this IRP process, we would simply replicate for all of these other discussions, right? And it's something that we're getting a third party, we're getting professional help. They've done this with IRPs in other cities and other parts of the country, and they kind of have an idea of what works. And our idea is to take some of that, use it in future discussions. And whatever momentum that we build up and discussions that we have with the IRP, basically use that to roll into other discussions as well. So I can't give you a lot of detail. I know it's a nebulous answer, right? But the idea is that we're thinking about it. We know that those discussions will have to happen. And so what we're building now will be a template for all of those future discussions.
And I'll just add, you know, we're just forming this group. Sure. So I think these are the types of questions we want to answer with that group. Like, how do we go about answering all of these questions about, is the grid ready for this? Do we need charging stations? Do we convert our fleet? I think that's what the group's gonna do. We just don't have any of those answers right now. And how do we involve the public in that? Where is it appropriate? When does it make sense? You know, that type of thing. So that is all just literally just starting. So we should have more of that. So, you know, maybe before March, we can give an update on kind of the progress of this without all the answers, but you know, maybe January or February, we can kind of say, hey, so we've got the group together and these are the public outreach. So we can think about that too. So yeah, we're trying to give regular updates since this is such a hot topic.
And I would encourage you to consider, you know, getting in from, you know, some early decisions out. I'm working with a condo association, small solar project, but mainly about how are they going to prepare all these garages they have for EVs. I mean, all of their garages, I think there are 33 of them or 60 of them are being run on 100 amp service right now. 2 people got EVs and they've overwhelmed their system already. And it would take megawatts. You know, so people are trying to make decisions right now. So the sooner the better we can get initial guidance, because it's happening quick. It's amazing. I mean, if you look all over the weekend and you see Chevy and all these commercials come out of the wonders, they don't even talk about internal combustion engines. It's happening fast.
And great.
It's a huge opportunity.
One last question. That statewide convening that you did was OUC there or Orlando? Okay, good. Because I think it was OUC. There were a lot of presentations at APPA this year, and I thought I remembered it was OUC that talked specifically about some of what they were doing in their community to be EV ready. So
there's a lot of things that one of the business development leaders and managers actually gave a presentation at that EV roundtable. And one of the things that they were rolling out is basically an introduction to EVs for fleets in their area. And basically what they're trying to build is kind of a roadshow to introduce fleet owners. And we're not just talking about, GRU fleets or whatever. We're talking about, the mom and pop fleets, like, are there pest control companies and bottling distribution folks, and anybody that runs a fleet of vehicles, kind of introducing them to what's available and how they can get involved with that, kind of giving them a tool, right? And so they wanted to do kind of a roadshow across the state. And that's one of the things that we talked about. Well, what cities would be interested in hosting those? It's kind of like you build all the stuff up front and then you can kind of replicate it in different places. And so those are some of the things that we talked about. But you're right. One of the big discussion points was this is a huge revenue opportunity for everyone involved, right? As our load is slowly climbing, as less than increase every year. We're talking about a huge increase in years out. Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? I'm not sure. Question, but we know it's coming. Right? So how do we?
And Eric, I think we talked about this briefly, but make sure I'm representing it right. I mean, one of the takeaways from this group is like all the other utilities are kind of the same place we are. Like, oh my goodness, we need to figure this out. This is coming. We don't know exactly what to do. And so everybody's kind of in that mode of, all right, we got to get our stuff together and develop a plan. And whether it's us charging or us converting fleet, all of that, all of us are kind of, and it's nice, like being in groups like FMEA, we can share knowledge and we can grow together as we go through that. And so that'll be part of what this working group will do as well, is look at best practices and see as they're being built across Florida and across the nation. So
There were a lot of wide eyes in those rooms when we started talking about numbers. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Right?
Yes.
So asking the specific question, who all had an EV policy or plan in place, and there were none. There were absolutely zero, right? And so is that acceptable? No, but it just means we got to get going and start building that. And so, as Tony said, that group, their eyes were kind of open to the urgency. We had just started working on it before that happened. But now there's definitely a new urgency, not only with us, but also across the state with other municipalities of how do we handle this? And it'll be a group effort. We'll be having lots more conversations.
All right, so we're ready to move on. The last thing on here is the energy policy.
Oh, yeah.
So this is something we worked long and hard on. There aren't too many of us left who worked on it. So we were asked by the city commission to develop a policy statement or set of policy statements. The policy statements are things that the commission refers to, people refer to say, yeah, we're thinking about doing this thing. How does that fit within our policy? And so that was the effort that was done here. We got most of the way through it and then it, I don't know, kind of stalled. So the question is about picking it up. Now, I can tell you, in my opinion, it was pretty good, but unfortunately I felt like it would take some work. It's not all policy in here that people got off the policy and into implementation, which is not what should be in here. I mean, it has some very specific, do this, don't do that kind of stuff, but policy is much more general and in a lot of ways not as fun. You know, people don't get nearly passionate about policy. And so we did divert from there. So we would have some work to do, but we weren't happy with doing it. So I don't want to just ignore it. Now, the backdrop of this now is with Tony's little bombshell there, we may not exist in a few months. That really, we're talking 2 more meetings, we're in the holidays, you know, we'll see where we are in January. So I'm definitely not going to suggest jumping on this thing between now and whether this board's potentially disbanding.
So let me add one thing to the bombshell that might be helpful. The one thing is that, and again, this is as the 6 charters, it's sort of like we're giving recommendations to the city commission as they brought this forward. I think, so don't hold me to this, even though I'm being recorded. I think the recommendations from the charters is going to be to not make any changes in January, just because it's a new commission and the subcommittee model requires a lot more involvement from commissioners. So they have a lot more meetings that at least 3 commissioners need to be on each of those committees. So they only have 7 commissioners, 6 commissioners married. So it requires them. So charters, we're a little concerned about potentially 3 or 4 new commissioners coming on, and all of a sudden they're in this like grinder of meetings and all of that. So most likely the charters, we're going to be recommending not making a change right away and delaying that. But again, and then the current city commission, what they've said so far is that they just want to make a recommendation, not a change, and a recommendation to the new commissioners of what to do next. So I just wanted to give that perspective that I just don't know the outcome, but that's kind of where we are at this time.
What was the rationale to make the change?
So I think that's a great question. That's one of the struggles, I think, is what problem are we trying to solve a little bit? But I think the rationale was a more structured way for the commissioners to be engaged in the running of the city. So it's just a more structured way for their involvement. The general policy committee model is you have this general policy committee that you can talk about anything. So you may have a meeting where you're talking about canines, and then the next discussion is about EVs, and then the next agenda item is, something else. And so the idea of the subcommittee model is more focused, and it gives you the ability kind of to do what the UAB does, go deeper on topics. And the subcommittee model, the idea is that you may spend several months or 6 months on a topic, working it out with the commissioners and staff, and you're working it out to a final product. Then that final product goes to the city commission. So I think it's the deeper dive on topics, and then more committees that are more focused on specific topics, and then instead of all over the place.
So like what predecessor to the UAB was a subcommittee. Are there still other subcommittees out there? Or
So the-
was that totally?
Finance and audit, I guess, would be considered that. So both the finance committee and the audit committee are committees that are staffed with city commissioners. And then these aren't subcommittees, but then you have joint committees that city commissioners are on. Like you might have a city commissioner, a county, like the Joint Water and Climate Policy Board. You have city commissioners, county commissioners, and then you have even some of the small cities have commissioners on there. So you have those, you have the finance and audit committee. I mean, there are, so this is one of the challenges I will tell you for staff. You guys interact with me on this board. There are, I think last year, I think it was 88 meetings like this that we had agenda items, addressing things. And so it starts to get a little unwieldy on what's driving our business. Like, how are we running the business, all the influences. And so, so I just, yeah, that's a challenge. And I think maybe that's part of what they're trying to address, is that a little bit of unwieldiness. As far as.
And just for somebody who haven't been around as long, historically, in my opinion, what happened, there was a push to have an independent board for GRU to take GRU totally away from the city, some different, and so this was, I think, a little bit of an appeasement to say, well, we'll make an independent advisory board rather than have it just be this committee with a couple of, people sitting on it. And I don't know if you agree with that, but that was, I think, a lot of the impetus.
Yeah, I mean, during that time, a referendum went to the voters to basically make, instead of GRU report to the city commission, it would be a completely independent board. It's kind of like what they have in Jacksonville and other places. And during that time, the city commission developed this as an advisory board. That was 5 years ago.
It kind of eliminates oversight, because the perfect example is the city, the county commission, the county's development review committee is the county commission. So it's like they're just giving themselves the go ahead to do what they want. So, I mean, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm not interested in being a non-voting member and sitting and listening to city commissioners decide what they want to do.
Neither will I.
So
Yes.
I just put that out there right now.
I would be
But,
disappointed if we
um,
go down that path.
Yeah. And it seems odd that this is coming up right before a shift change, so to speak. But I don't
I think
know how politicians
this
think.
happened. Really, and I appreciate that they're not saying we're going to do it as we leave. They're just saying this is going to be a recommendation. You kind of, as you leave, you start to think, well, what would I recommend for the next guys?
I came in late. Is there talk about revising the city charter?
No, it would be a change in ordinance that would establish subcommittees for the city commission. And one of the subcommittees that would be the utilities committee. And that if they do that, commissioners have talked about if they create that subcommittee, then they may recommend that the utility advisory board is not needed anymore. And that it could be a model where you just dissolve the utility advisory board. Another model could be that you take some members from this board and put it on the subcommittee, what they describe as non-voting members. So you have the commissioners would be voting members, and then you have some public that are non-voting members.
So the charter would stay the same.
Yeah, it doesn't change the city charter, it changes city ordinance. It's an ordinance.
So in terms of the policy, I mean,
Yes.
I guess what I suggest, is to keep it because we've been asked to do it. And, again, I'm not thinking anything's going to happen between now and the end of the year.
So, Mr. Chair, we've spent some time kind of thinking about it a little bit, and I was involved a little bit when it was done. There's a few sections on water, wastewater that I commented on when it was created. We've had some discussions internally, staff, just about the desire to be more involved with the UAB in developing policy. And I think the more alignment we have between our staff and as the policy is that being developed, the better it's gonna be in terms of a tool that's utilized and implemented. And so I have a few slides, I just kind of wanted to talk through a few things that might guide the discussion a little bit. It's up to you all, like where we want to go, but I just wanted to share a couple of things, kind of overall.
Tony, can I ask a question? How did we get to this point?
To
Who developed this?
the energy policy.
Yeah.
This board
This
did.
board here?
Yep.
Okay,
And
so,
I think there was input from GRU staff in
Okay.
that, but it was primarily a product of the.
okay, and who drafted it?
We did.
Okay.
Various members of the board pitched in.
Very Alfred.
Well, I say, and by we, of the folks that are here, it's you two that are left, because I mean, even Fletcher and I came in, I think basically as this policy was being sort of voted on. I mean,
I wrote a couple of policies.
Okay, so you were here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
But
so, and the way it was originally presented to me was that this policy document was meant to be sort of a joint policy document that was developed by GRU and the UAB. And at some point, that process kind of went off the rails a little bit and it became more of a UAB document and less like something that GRU would actually take some ownership of. And so that's the way, at least it was sort of
well,
explained to
I
me.
mean, I would say a little differently. We were directed by the city, the UAV was directed by the city commission to draft it. I would say it got a little confrontational with the former manager of GRU in terms of, there was not a lot of collaboration, congeniality going on at the time. So it was not that, but I think it was appropriate for the UAB to be leading it because that was what we're supposed to do. It's not supposed to be a GRU developed policy. It's supposed to be kind of an independent. I mean, that said, I think I would be much happier with much more of a collaborative. And like I said, I think it would need work from here. So I'm interested to see.
Question, since I was not a part of any of it, I got a couple of questions. First of all, I think it's a pretty well constructed document. It's got most of the things you would look for in a policy, what do you call it, in the strategy. Right? Just as a definition, what do you call it when you, what is your definition of net zero carbon?
My definition of net zero?
Well, what was it? It's in here all over the place. What does it mean? What does net zero mean to you?
That's a good
Can I just interject? I actually, if it's okay with you, because I have many questions about this policy as well. And personally, if it would be okay, and just in terms of process, to kind of hear where Tony's coming from as far as moving forward on this, and then I've got a list myself of questions and concerns. I
thought everybody was in on it.
No.
Last guy here didn't know.
No, absolutely.
But I do think that's really important that.
It's really important.
Right, because that is a.
Depends on your technology, depends on the money.
And just, I'm sorry, just the real quick answer is the city commission says we're gonna be at net zero.
they came up with it.
They came up, the city commission, not to
What
deflect.
do they mean?
So we have a resolution. We can talk about what that means, but I will say at a real simple level, the net zero is the big driver of what the policy is and where we're headed. I mean, that's like the big picture of, what the plan that we need to be developing and implementing over the next many years. So what I want to do big picture, I'm not going to get us to an answer, but I wanted to kind of give a big picture of just how we operate and what guide our priorities and our goals and objectives and our strategic plans and all of that. And so there's a couple of things. One is the city commission has these really high level goals that we as GRU support those goals, just like general government and different departments. Those high level goals are up here. Equitable community, more sustainable community, great place to live and experience, resilient local economy, and best in class neighbor services. So obviously these are real high level, but what we try to do is everything that's in our strategic plan as GRU and our business plan supports one of these. And we actually support them all through everything we do, but a lot of what we do kind of fits in the best in class neighbor services on the bottom. So things fit all the categories, but most of it fits in this high level best in class neighbor services. So then this is our mission, vision, or vision, mission, and culture, or statements of who we are. So GRU envisions a well-run business, optimizing all aspects of the organization for the benefit of the customers and the community at large. GRU will provide safe, reliable, competitively priced utility services in an environmentally responsible manner, and will actively contribute to the enhancement of the quality of our community, quality of life in our community. And then our culture is GRU will strive to earn the honor of being Gainesville's best place to work based on inclusion, the quality of the staff, the operational teamwork, the internal alignment and with corporate goals, and a passionate commitment to the community it serves. So again, we're real high level, we're getting down a little bit closer. That our core values really kind of are these things that are in those statements: community, competitive prices, environmental stewardship, safety, and reliability. And then this really gets us to our strategic plan, but then our goals and objectives of what all we're going to accomplish each year really fits into these first 6 categories that you see up here. Value to customer, sustainability, reliability, financial strength, productivity, and then employee engagement and safety. And collaboration is kind of really the umbrella or the foundation of how to accomplish those. The reason I wanted to show kind of this is just a thought of the energy policy fitting into this framework. So I'm not saying we need to do that, but like as my brain was trying to work through how do we make sure the energy policy is a tool that's driving our business just like our strategic plan? It was to align it with the strategic plan. And then within this, the energy policy, and again, I'm a little uncomfortable with energy policy. Are we just talking about energy, or are we talking about the utility? Like, are we saying that like sort of GRU policy?
It should be the GRU.
Or or are we talking about energy?
Because water and that stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Just kidding.
That was a major stumbling block when we kind of got sidetracked, because some of the statements deal with things like building construction standards, for example, which GRU doesn't really have any responsibility for. Some of the statements deal with transportation, which really, GRU doesn't really deal with that at all. And on down the line. So there's a real major question here as we proceed through this. What is the relationship of the draft energy policy to GRU and vice versa? I mean, where do we stand on that? What is it that we're talking about? What is it?
So this is for the city commission.
Well,
It's a policy, but I mean, your points are well taken, that, and I agree that it did kind of drift out of what I would have thought the scope, the domain of this policy would be.
So, and I think,
So I'm sorry, just to conclude that thought. So it's a policy, not for GRU, but for the city. So if the city's making decisions, they would refer to this policy. If you would agree.
yeah. So I agree with that. And I think where my mind is, and again, I'm not saying this is what we should do, but in my mind, if the policy, let's just say it's the policy, not energy policy, but if the policy aligned with this sort of strategic goals that we have, like these categories, and then what the policy does is talks about ways to achieve those goals. Like the policy is like, yeah, we should value the customer by doing this, and like, so it sort of supports what we're doing, because I will tell you, I know this looks really simple, but from these we draw out goals and objectives for every single employee at GRU to support these things, and it trickles down all throughout the organization of what everybody does to make sure that we have that balance support for the community. And so like under sustainability, that may really be the focus on net zero and things of that nature. So you'd have these different elements of policies that this policy would reference. So like what I mean by that is you'd reference the net zero resolution and supporting the importance of that. You'd reference like our debt management policy that we talked about, last couple of weeks ago, talking about financial stability for the organization under the financial section. So it would be like the UAB is saying, these things are important to be the basis and the policy for GRU to continue to operate going forward. So those are my thoughts. I don't know if that's right. Whether we go in that direction or not, the other piece that I think is really important is if we continue to draft this out, that we really have staff at GRU be a part of the discussions and a part of, okay, yeah, that works or that doesn't work and here's why, so that we're putting together something that is implementable, not something that, okay, yeah, they said that, but let's put it on the shelf because we can't do that. We're putting something that at least you all hear the feedback from staff as it's being developed and not just a product that, yeah. I think it'd be important to have that subject matter expert input through the discussion, and we're committed to doing that collaboratively going forward.
And I totally appreciate the support of that, because that's some of what's missing. It's easy for us to write stuff, but to go, for someone from the GRU side to go, oh my God, you have no idea the implications of what you just wrote.
Right.
So a question for you. You mentioned, the net zero goal. I mean, when I read sustainability, that's not what I'm reading there. I read sustainability, I read that as, we're planning for the future of the utility. So, because that was a problem I had as I read your goals, because that net zero is that's like this elephant in the room. And because some of your goals go counter to each other too, that you're gonna have to balance to say, well, I want the lowest possible cost, and I want these other, the best in quality service, and So I guess first, most importantly, because a lot of this was written by people who care very much about the environmental side of things.
Right.
And so I think that's part of what's missing in my mind. So where does the net zero really fit into all of this?
So can I jump in on that? And I do that as the chief sustainability officer, right? Is how do I answer that question? Those are exactly the questions that we have to answer. Is that how do we make a policy? How do we do business? How do we make plans that incorporate and address those things? Because you're right, we cannot ignore cost. It's an important element. But we also cannot ignore the environment. Right? And we also cannot ignore the impact on our customers and the community or on our employees. So that you're right, it has to be a balanced approach. And that is the whole idea of sustainability, is that balanced approach. Because, I'm going to speak frankly for a second. There's a lot of voices that care a lot about the environment. They're not wrong, but sometimes they just don't understand all the implications that go into that. And it's my job to make sure that all those implications are accounted for. And what comes out is a balanced approach that accomplishes those things, right? So in a very short answer, you're right. It's hard to do that, but it's something that we have to do.
And I can tell you, I have this conversation many times. Just shut it all down, put in solar. Isn't that what you want? We should do that. And here are all the reasons you can't do that. And so
Well, the sustainability guy, now we know. So you have to know the difference between zero carbon, what do you call it, or is it zero carbon and no carbon, right?
So net zero.
There's a difference.
There's absolutely a difference. Yeah. So it all
You can get there different ways.
right. And that's part of the discussions when we talk about these long-term plans. These plans will look counterintuitive at some points, right? Because there will be things that we have to do for reliability. There will have things that we have to do for cost that look like we're not getting to the end goal, but as a matter of fact, we are. It actually enables us to get there a little faster in a little different way. And so again, balanced approach. What are we trying to do? How are we going to get? Those are all factors that go into it, and all the questions that we have to answer. So I'm glad this discussion is happening, because you're right. There's some things that come out in the public, and the people on jury are like, you don't know what you just said.
There's some pretty big strategies out there that says you're never going to get rid of all the gas plants. Okay, you better start thinking about carbon capture, because you're going to need some. And these people are not nuts. I mean, these are big people strategy out there saying you're going to need it well past 2045.
And I can, like I was saying, when I'm having this discussion with people, I feel for you guys, because when I have it, they're getting angry at me, a solar guy, for saying it. I can't, where they know I have no interest in reason to be saying that, so I can't. I feel for you guys. I'm sure the vitriol that you guys must.
You gotta get there without burning down the damn grid.
And so this group, I believe, is also instrumental in being a mouthpiece for just that fact of understanding and knowing all the things that we bring to this board, knowing all the discussions that we have, knowing all the work and the data and the analysis that goes in behind these decisions and recommendations, to be an ambassador to help say, it ain't as easy as it looks. When somebody comes to me and says, why don't you just do this? I automatically say, you have no clue of what you just said. You don't understand the scope of the problem. If it's just that easy, it would have already been done, right? So ambassadorship, conversations, discussions, making sure we're all talking about a balanced approach to answer these questions. Okay, soapbox away, sorry.
No, and that's one of the reasons I would be sorry to see the board go away, because we are ambassadors. We're not working for GRU, we're not working for the city, we're not incentivized to be able to talk about these things. Now, the question of what is net zero, I can't remember, did the city go to, a lot of people throw net zero around. The reality is very little is net, solar is not net zero because it takes energy to build it. The biomass plant isn't net zero. You can say that biomass would have been burned in the field or rotted, but their trucks running. I mean, just, entropy gets into this, but in general, someone just kind of defines it. Does the city have a definition?
Well, there's a resolution that defines that.
But it's very nebulous.
That's my memory is.
But I mean, that's something I think we could talk about as we talk about this policy of what that looks like and how, how you get there and how you define that. I think that would be important as part of this discussion of this policy.
Because I think that's where this policy document misses a little bit, that it's too prescriptive. Policies aren't supposed to be. I mean, I personally think we need nuclear. I mean, I don't see any way to get where we need to without nuclear. And that's not popular with everyone I deal with, but that's the closest to it.
Strategy, you gotta give yourself some wiggle room or something like this.
Yeah, and that's a great point, is that we don't have a clear path. I mean, buying a bunch of batteries today probably doesn't make sense. We talk about the stuff that does, but anyway, so it's a very interesting topic of.
So
In terms of next steps.
yeah, so that's what I was just gonna say. I don't know what that looks like. Like I said, I kind of throwing out this idea that we have alignment with what our strategic plan has in these areas, and then within those areas, we develop kind of some of the policy things to guide to that ultimate path. But we could do it a different way. I think the big thing that I'm asking is that we engage with each other through the process so that we're not in conflict, as you said, or we may get to a point where we're not completely aligned, but at least we've worked through with the subject matter experts to that point. And so I don't know beyond that, like if we want to have a series of discussions, like where we talk about those different topic areas, like at the next meeting, we pick one and we kind of start going into it, or you take the structure that you all have and we just follow that structure but we engage on it. Like, so we bring staff to the next meeting and we kind of go through the topic. You guys ask questions. We're trying to answer the questions to try to kind of converge on something. I think that part of it is just important to me, is that we're working through that with the right staff in the room to have that conversation and everything. So what's developed, has more merit.
What do you mean by topics? From this 1.0 to the end, or do you have another set of topics? Such as your if you value the customers,
Yes,
and then we'll analyze that.
correct. So
Okay.
that's just one suggestion, is that we go to value the customers and we establish policy of how we do that. And again, we would take that topic, we'd have staff in the room to kind of address how we would do that, work together and kind of develop it that way. Or you kind of use the outline you have, and the first section is built environment. And we could use that as the structure, and we, again, bring in staff to have that work together toward the elements that are included in that. And we can provide feedback and input on that as we build it. So,
What do you guys think of those two approaches?
So I just want to be clear with this document, this policy is citywide. This is bigger than GRU. So if we sort of back up a slide here, to me, a couple slides, that is the set of goals that we need to have as our sort of big picture referencing back to is this, because that is citywide. This policy is citywide. And of course, within this policy, everywhere we can, we want to get GRU's active involvement and input, and we want to refer back to GRU strategic goals. But I think just to be clear, this is meant to be a citywide policy and not just a GRU policy. If it was just a GRU policy, we wouldn't be developing, right? I mean,
I'm not sure. I guess I'm not sure. Like,
I mean, when I look through this, you know, it's like, and we look through the pieces that, unless we're going to just completely jettison things like the built environment. I mean, most of the document, really, the built environment, land use, things that, for the most part, GRU has nothing to do with, then we need to reference back to the city. We either need to reference back to the citywide perspective, or we need to jettison 3/4 of this document. And so,
And when we developed it, we were thinking citywide, and that's why it does kind of go out. I guess my thinking is that both this slide and the next one, I mean, I guess my thinking is we spent a lot of time on this, is I'm thinking to follow this, because a number of those things, they can't be taken, you know, independently. They do cross over. They're multiple goals in this. So I would think my suggestion would be to start at the beginning and say, okay, let's look at the built environment and look, how does that meet, you know, how does that match these goals, you know, these 6 goals or five goals, if you can count, 5 goals. And, you know, how does this meet, you know, GRU's, whatever the other one was. You know,
I think what you were talking about, Jason, would argue for what the commission is aiming at when they put together a blend, we call it, which would be a much more generalized approach to something like this. Although I don't know what would happen if somebody said, well, what if the utility wanted to do something like that? You'd never get into a discussion at the levels that this committee would ever consider, because the people would not be the same. They would not have the backgrounds, would not have had all the background that these people have. They'd never be able to get there. And so I'm not saying it's a bad thing, because it may fit just right for commission, because they only want to go this deep, right, rather than this deep. This committee in the utilities is able to go down here because you've had years of experience listening to the staff and to the general manager.
Is there some body or some office that speaks for the city as a whole? Maybe the city manager or the mayor? I mean, it's above the level of GRU, somebody that deals with all aspects of city policy.
so the city of Gainesville, there's 6 charter officers. The city manager and the general manager are 2 of those officers. So I'm responsible for the utility. The city manager is responsible for everything else associated with the city. And both of us report to the city commission. So there's not another level, you know, it's charter officers and then the city commission. Does that answer your question, member?
Well, I guess so. I mean, you take building codes, for example, that would be through some other.
That would be through the city manager.
Okay.
Building codes.
So then we really need to deal with this policy with the city manager, at least for some portion of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what member Foltz brought up there about across the city, like, to be honest, I was thinking it was more directed toward the energy policy for GRU and our approach. And so when you said that, I want to go back and read basically what the ordinance says for the UAB and what it's requesting for this. If it is across the city, then I think there are things in here that do kind of address things that are in general government under the city manager. And so that's okay, but I would almost want to say we'd want to engage their staff as well, just like I'm talking about with GRU, to make sure those things are, you have subject matter experts and it's understood and we understand like how they operate. If that's going to be in the policy, I think that's going to be an important piece.
Well, I mean, I think this is an important discussion. Maybe we can make a decision. Just generally, do we as the UAD want to develop a policy related to the things within GRU's domain, or do we want to do a more broad city thing?
For URU's domain, I don't agree, the code, city codes and all that stuff, that's way out inside our, our bailiwick. I have been with other committees with the cities of Fulton Beach and which would take care of some of this stuff, but it was not anything associated with a committee like this one.
Jason?
I think, as Tony said, we kind of need to refer back to the original charge. I mean, if this document is an adequate reflection of the original charge that we were given, then I think the approach that you're suggesting, that we kind of start working our way through the document, relate it back to the city's goals, discuss GRU strategic goals, and then identify throughout along the way, who are the other entities within the city we need to be liaising with on this, whether it's, codes or such and such along the way. But to me, it's whatever the charge was. If they wanted something more narrowly focused on just GRU, well, then yeah, we can probably cut this thing to pieces. But if they were looking for something that was broader, then we've got a broader document that we just need to refine.
I'll be interested to see, because honestly, my tendency is to say, no, we're a utility advisory board. Some of this, I think we all have our pet projects, and I mean, there's things that I would love to get involved in to say, and some of it is like, should new developments be required to have EV infrastructure? Is that, so there's some gray areas in this too. I don't know. What do you guys think? Tim, what do you think?
I would personally appreciate a reminder of what the city commission asked for when we started down this road.
What's the remit?
Right, because I think that's really what it comes back to. And I want to deliver something to them that fits within their vision of what they were expecting, and not give them some, it's not like we're trying to write a comprehensive plan here. It's for the utility and how they're going to meet their goals.
What was it?
Isn't there a section? Oh, I think it might be up here.
The work plan, is that reference the utility?
Yeah, it's
Utility policy right there, section A.
So develop and recommend a utility policy for consideration and adoption by the city commission. The utility policy shall evaluate energy and utility use based on a triple bottom line approach of equity, economy, or sustainability. Utility board shall recommend updates and revisions to the utility policy as necessary. Not included to.
This seems to pretty clearly say utility policy.
Voting. I think that's what's guiding this effort.
What about the promoting cooperation between the utility, city commission, and others, city boards? I don't know about
Right.
committees. The departments and other individuals. That might be some of the.
so that similar activities within the city can be coordinated.
Yeah.
Such activities may include but not limited
They
to.
talk about affordable housing and economic development.
Yeah.
I'm talking about coordination between other entities. It sounds like that are responsible for those.
Promoting cooperation.
But I
So
think
the
that,
policy is supposed to promote cooperation between the utility commission and other city boards. Such
What does that mean? If we suggest what they should do?
a little bit of a stretch.
Negotiate?
We are suggesting things in the policy right now.
Huh?
So there are suggesting.
Well,
things.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
But is that what they really meant?
Yeah.
But I would say like, EV infrastructure is one that does cross over, so we
Yeah.
be kind of covered in, not we're telling them what to do, but we have a policy
You're
that.
saying we can be a better utility, to call it, if you guys would consider, what do you call it, some things along these lines.
So,
The language in the policy document itself seems to imply that it was predicated on this broader citywide vision. So I don't know, and again, I wasn't here when we were asked to do this, and the folks that, worked on it might have a little better memory of this, but to me, the way it is pitched in this document is that it is meant to guide the community toward achieving the goals of net zero, which is obviously GRU is a huge component of that, but not by any means the only piece of that. So I don't know, aside from getting clarification from the commission on, hey, when you guys are deciding if we're going to continue to exist, maybe you could give us a little input on what you want in this policy document or don't want. Beyond that, I mean,
we are, vaguely remember some of the discussion when it came up and we got really vague answers. Should we just limit it just to GRU within this? No, you can go, but it was very much it wasn't a clear, it was a generally, no, you don't have to limit yourself. So,
Well, the way it's written, here in the way I'm saying it says, what do you call it, coordinate with. What do you call it, and negotiate with, what do you call it, others. There's nothing wrong with that. Point is that, what do you call it, no one committee can say, this is what we're gonna do, and you have to do this. Or if you don't, the city ain't gonna get what they need.
so one path forward would be for GRU to come back and, go through the sections that are in here. I think there's some good stuff in here. It is just a suggestion and say from the subject matter experts' opinion, we agree with this, we don't agree, this is problematic, or this is not within the purview of GRU. And then we can decide, do we want to keep it, do we want to get someone else, or jettison it.
Well, and I think we could even the ones that aren't in the purview of GRU, we could even say, that's a public works thing.
Right.
So if you want to coordinate with public works staff and you can work with public works, so we can give guidance on that. Of what department within the city that would apply to. And I would, if all those things are gonna stand there, I would really need to bring the city manager up to speed on. Hey, there's this policy, it affects, it has impacts on things you're responsible for. And my recommendation is to have staff available to do this type of thing.
Well, and we could, as we develop this list of the non-GRU stuff, go back to the city commission and say, here's a list of stuff that, if we decide we should have some input on these things, building and codes or something, see if that's what they want at that point. But start with the GRU stuff. Does that make sense to people?
And just so I'm clear, so like the end game of this would be have a policy that you would present, the UAB would present to the city commission saying, these are the things that we think the city of Gainesville should be focusing on from an energy standpoint. You're just presenting this work product at the end.
I'm sorry, from a utility standpoint.
So, and that was
I don't know. I think it would be city, like all the city though, not just utility, right?
Right.
that was something I was never clear on. Is this document something that is eventually going to be codified and added to the land development regulations or some other form of the city legislation, or is it just going to be a document floating around City Hall.
I think it's a document, because it's not code. It's
Right.
not- Or quite, it's something, what I was told, it was something for people to point to when someone, when they're saying, okay, let's do this new ordinance, or let's, pass
Right.
this thing to say, well, hey, that's going against your policy.
We're not writing ordinance here.
No.
So
Probably that would be brought up as a resolution.
my thing is, we've already gone through a lot of the steps, and Carla just did a couple of public interfacing events with this policy. I never heard, I don't know, maybe I missed it. She didn't have a chance to give a presentation about that. If any feedback that she may or may not have gotten that would have an impact on the language in here. And the reason I brought it up a few meetings back is because I'm sort of at the point now where I think maybe we really just need to take one more pass through this, see if it aligns with the goals that Tony had up there earlier, maybe refine a few sentences here or there, and then and kick it to the city commission. Because I mean, the heavy lifting's been done. I don't want to get into a deep review and start rewriting the thing. But I think, and some of the, like, you start looking at some of this, like I was looking at the HVAC section, and I was like, well, why are we getting into that? And then when you read the whole thing, it's like, it applies to municipal buildings and construction projects. So, it's not like we're trying to impact the building code. I think we did keep it as narrow as possible in terms of who we're directing the aspirations towards. So maybe over a series of a few workshops, we can just kind of go through it with Tony's the GRU goals and make sure none of these veer too far off of the course.
So, I mean, I think what we could do is, like you just said, maybe some of the workshop meetings, we say, we're gonna do the built environment. We have staff here to kind of walk through maybe our feedback from staff, but when we read this is what we see is missing, or this is what we see should be different, or we think this might be difficult, or this is public works, this is, a different department. We could have a workshop plan where we hit section 1, then the next workshop could be section 2. We'll have to do a little bit of work on our end, I think, ahead of those workshops to kind of give that feedback. But that's kind of something Eric and I were talking about as a way we could walk through that. And then, like I said, we would just give the feedback from the SMEs, or here's the thought, or that type of thing. So I think that could be a sound approach over the next several workshops, and this is just the agenda item for the next 3 or 4.
How do you guys feel about that?
As you're doing that, you almost have to think through what is the impact on the goals and what I can affect.
Yeah, that's what
And as you're going through something like that, say, yeah, this would work, and we could get to this goal, but only if we get full cooperation out of Team B over here.
Right.
That's written into here.
Right.
So that's the tricky piece of it.
Yeah, and I think that's precisely right, and I think that's what we'll have to do. So, like, if you guys said, hey, the policy is we want 100% EV vehicles by the end of the year, we'd have to say, well, this is what it would take to achieve that, and it's not achievable, or we're going to need a rate increase to do that, and this is the impact of that, or world supply chain is not going to allow. Like, we want to give some of that context so that we don't put a policy in place that has unintended consequences.
So wouldn't that be a policy? I mean, to me, that sounds like more implementation than a policy.
And I don't think we have anything like that.
No, we don't.
Yeah.
Wait, goals.
Goals here.
So,
Right.
Jason, did you go out with Carla? Was that policy stuff you went out, policy meetings you went out with her?
Well, it was citizen feedback, right?
Policy.
Yeah, and if you remember, the whole reason we decided to do those is because GRU sent out that survey to folks, asking them to look at the policy and give feedback. It was like an email survey that went out. And the response to that was so strongly worded from people in the community, mostly about prices, or awful lot about prices. There was a lot of other strong sentiments in there about sustainability as well and things like that. But that it was so sort of like, whoa, that we were like, all right, we need to sort of take a step back and really do some public input sessions. And we had 2 of them that I remember. And there were, people at both, but overwhelmingly, again, the sentiment at those meetings was, my bill's too damn high. It wasn't, we weren't talking about the policy.
Did you get any significant policy feedback from those workshops?
No,
And for those of you who weren't here, the GRU survey was awful. It was read through this whole document. What do you think?
it was a contractor that did the survey. It wasn't GRU internal folks that did it, just for the record. But yes, I agree. It was not a good survey. So anyway.
What you guys think? Is that sound like GRU will come back a section at a time over the next so many workshops?
What, if we do this, what will be their first topic, the number 1.0?
The second one.
Don't remember it?
1.0, they're very good folks.
Yes.
Unless people feel differently, I have no.
And somebody who wasn't here, it's a nice piece of work.
Yes.
It's a nice piece of work.
I don't know, I hate to be the squeaky wheel, but I think this whole thing is nuts. I do, I think it's worthless, I think it's all just blather, I think it's just words. It has no implementation value. When you spend money on something, you have some directive, something concrete, you're gonna have policy in the sense that's what you're gonna do, you're gonna build EVs charging stations or something. But this is all worded in kind of airy-fairy sort of language up at the 80,000 foot level. It doesn't have any implementation, doesn't have sharp teeth. It doesn't achieve anything.
And I appreciate what you're saying. I guess I would counter that to say that's what policy is. That it's not implementation.
It doesn't get down to implementation.
Frustrating about working on policy is not fun in a lot of ways because it is kind of, it's policy, the next step after policy is implementation. That's the fun stuff. And that's where I feel like sometimes we went into implementation. You have to say, oh yeah, let's think about EVs or let's have an aspirational goal. It's not fun. So I agree with what you're saying and appreciate it.
Yeah, you have, and eventually you're gonna have to get implementation plans. You have to have a strategy to actually get there.
But you start, your policy is useful, but as you're doing the implementation, to have something to refer back to and say, well, feel kind of like we do with the, your goals and stuff, as I say, it's more of a reference document than actually anything good or fun.
And if you want future commissioners to actually use it as a guide, it's got to be balanced, like Eric said, and not, trying to,
Yes.
So,
Or else I don't think no one's going to use it.
right.
It's usually useless. That one.
Fletcher, hit your point, it's not a plan.
It's not a point.
If it was a plan will come. If it emanates out of here, a plan will come with a strategy to actually implement the plan and actually projects and everything else flowing out of it. Which means you have, at that point, you have to have a cost.
There was discussion of after we got this done, to start talking about, you would be coming up with implementation plans.
So let us, I guess, here's where I'm hearing, tell me what you all think, would be that we would take this section 1.0, we would kind of work through it, evaluate it, figure out feedback or explanations or give more information or suggestions. And we would come to a workshop where we would, as staff, we would address each of these topics and give our recommendations, and you guys could give feedback, and then you all are gonna decide whether it stays like it is, or we change something, or we add something, or remove something. And we'll try with section 1, and if it's a utter failure, maybe we'll decide a different path forward. How does that sound?
That's a good approach.
I mean, it is, I'm looking through like this section one, it is varied. It's kind of hits a lot of different topics.
And you're saying, well, let's start with section one. Is there, might there be a better section which is more GRU centric?
I don't know.
I'd be okay. I would be comfortable with any GRU.
Section
Which section
two.
you would like to start with?
I agree, as long as you give us some advance notice so that we can read up on it and be ready to discuss it. To me, what might work best would be for you all to sort of pick the order that we go through it, because then if you identify a section that you say, well, look, this is really outside of GRU's purview, you really need to work with the city manager on this. Then we kind of put that towards the back and we have time to alert the city manager that we'd like to talk to them about this topic. So I'm also perfectly happy to let GRU kind of pick the order. Just let me know, in advance so I can read.
Would it be possible to get the 5 slides you showed earlier emailed to the UAE? So I'd like to have those as a reference point, and I think it would be helpful to, maybe some things can be moved around, maybe it can be organized a little bit better so that it mirrors the GRU goals a little better.
Yeah, I think for sure. And so I think what we'll take back is, let's look at section 1, maybe section 2, figure out kind of like you said, what's a better one to start with. We'll agenda that so we all know, and you'll provide as much, if we have any information to provide that could be helpful to prepare. And then we'll come prepared with sort of a evaluation of that. What's good and bad, what are suggested changes for you all then to make decisions if you agree, disagree, or want to do something different. So yeah, let's keep it there. I don't want to commit to one or the other until we kind of get some eyes on it with staff and think about it.
Can I throw in one more thing that I think would be useful? This third column here in the document, the cross-reference column, is largely unused. I mean, it just references other parts of the policy. And to Tim's point, what might be a really interesting, useful way to frame this would be to repurpose that third column. And what we're actually cross-referencing is GRU strategic goals, city strategic goals, and policy. That way we're really trying to make sure that as much as possible, this is grounded in those things.
I like that idea.
Yeah. Yeah, good suggestion.
Let me ask this outside the ballpark question. What you said was absolutely true, but the feedback was like 99%. Our utility bills are way too goddamn high. Essentially what we got in large measure. Do we need to have a policy addressing the cost of electricity and what could be done about it? I don't know that I have an answer. I don't know that anybody does. I'm just wondering, is that our directive? Is that what people are telling us? We need to have a policy on reducing the cost of electricity in Alachua County.
If you recall, in our work plan, for a long time, we had this row that was specifically speaking to that point about cost of utilities. And what we eventually decided upon talking about as a group was, well, this is obviously something that needs to be embedded in everything we talk about, right? Throughout all our conversations. And so to me, to your point, I think it just needs to be embedded throughout this entire document. We can't talk about anything that we're doing as a community and as a utility without really seriously thinking about what are going to be the impacts on ratepayers here that are already hurting.
If I were a commissioner and I was receiving a report from UAB, I would be looking for a section that dealt very specifically with that question. Even though it may be diffused throughout the entire document, if somebody could congeal it and say, well, here's what we need to do. This is what our policy is.
Well, if you're gonna get that general, and I agree with you, then you have to go down and start talking the difference between cost and rates.
Yeah.
You get about $36 million out there that has nothing to do with the cost of the utility.
It's not a single bullet point or silver bullet issue. And I would say there are many policies in here that attempt to address the rates and bill levels. But then anything the utility does is going to cost money and is going to have an impact on on rates and bills. So I mean, it's not, it's it's a real big picture issue.
Well, and review the base policy, 0.0, the base policy at the very beginning. GRU shall provide safe, reliable, competitively priced utility services in an environmentally responsible manner to enhance the quality of life in our community. To this end, the policies in this document must only be sustainably implemented with respect to the triple bottom line of being economically viable, environmentally responsible, and equitable across Gainesville and GRU service territory. That's the base policy from the beginning.
Okay,
GRU doesn't have full control over that. Because the commission can come in and take half of their revenues and use it for something else. That's the point.
But this policy is not for GRU, it's for the city.
Well, that's why
Oh, yeah, a lot of people miss that point. Very much. Why did GRUs raise my rates again? We didn't. All right, anything else on this topic?
I'll say this, my view on rates is that it's value. I think that they would pay of the rates that they're paying if they saw more value. And that's not just a GRU issue, it's a city issue. So it's value that they're looking for. It's not just to lower their bills, right? I mean, if we just, figured out how to get them to a 0, but they didn't see any value in it, you'd be just as upset about that as well.
They're not to go too long, like, but I'm interested to hear, what do you mean by, like, what would value look like?
Well, I mean, so like if I go to buy a car, right, and it's like I can get 2 cars, right, and this one's 20,000 and this one's 200, right, and I only go with cost, and I get this one, but it doesn't run, it doesn't, there's no value in that, right? But this 20,000 one does like everything that I want and more, like for good value, right? So it's not just merely just cutting cost. I mean, obviously it's high to the point where customers are like, that's just too expensive, right? But I think you can get to a point where there's value. And again, value goes beyond just, I turn my light switch on and it comes on when I need it, but it's, do I see the GRU doing the things that are necessary? Am I willing to pay a little bit more because I value the way that they treat the environment and do those other things, right? It's got to be more than just, if you just go to as low possible costs, we're looking for value, not.
I think you're right on that from a value standpoint, but I'll go back to this same thing I said before. I don't ride the buses.
Right.
Okay, but my power bill is high as heck. What do you call it? And that's what I'm focusing on day in, day out. What do you call it? The city came and said that they were going to do something for somebody else. And so they put it into the transportation. Okay, and somebody got value there.
Right.
Okay, but it wasn't me, it's the ratepayer for like, my bill is high.
And I agree with that. Same thing for like a taxpayer, right? And they're like, why are my taxes going up, right? But then somebody else is like, well, I like having national parks or whatever is out there, right? So I don't mind doing that, right? And it's a message that has to come from the city as well. What's the value that we're getting out of this, and not just as cheap as possible, period.
No, and I think that's a good point. I think Eric was saying that people don't, that easy silver bullet, let's get rid of the GFT. And I say this to people all the time. We could do that. The city could do that. We would get rid of all our social services, part of our police, part of our fire department. We can do, that's what you would do. That's okay. If that's what people want, but there is
It takes 3 hours to respond to a fire, and you're like, well, why are we doing it this way? There's no value in that, right?
People have a disconnect between, and then GRU provides a great service, great reliability. People love that. They don't want to pay for it, but they would. And so it's a tough, it's tough. No silver bullets. They want it all. Like Todd Chase, conservative commissioner, he said to me once, people, his constituents, let's do this, let's cut this, but get rid of something. Oh, no, anything but that, people picket and protest to get rid of anything they have, but we want to cut our costs. So it's tough. These are tough positions. Some Tony's gonna be.
All right, so game plan kind of wrapping us up. I think the direction The next meeting we have is November 10th. We're gonna bring the home energy survey scores and the updates on those types of things, talk to CWC about them presenting. That's the only agenda item I think that we've talked about for that next meeting. And the following workshop after that, I'm gonna try to get our folks together of what we can look at and look at either full sections or partial sections. And as soon as we kind of know what we can put together as a game, get out to you all what that is to address. And we'll kind of give our overview from staff of that section of what we think, add, subtract, whatever, and give perspective and allow you all to kind of work on that. So that would be the workshop after November 10th, which I don't know, Christine, do you? So the next meeting is November 10th.
I see
Which is
something
regular.
for Thursday, December 8th.
Okay, so December 8th is the next regular meeting. So I don't think we have a workshop in November because of Thanksgiving.
I need to
Right.
double read.
Which we can do this at a regular meeting too. It doesn't have to be a workshop.
I do not.
So maybe what will be November 10th will be the home energy surveys, and then December 8th can be the. Does that make sense? Okay, we'll finalize and communicate that out.
Moving right along. Public comment. Hearing none, any member comment?
Just one last plug. If anybody didn't already grab one of these, there are a couple more copies left tonight. So thanks for bringing
It
it.
is a pretty good, manual. I only made it through about 2/3 of it, I think.
This is a APPA publication.
Anyone else?
Member comments. I just got a under the table question, back of the envelope question. If you reduce the cost to ratepayers of $36 million, what would that do to the average residential bill? How much would that reduce?
Mr. Chair, I hate to do that on the fly of what that is, but that's something we can bring back.
You ought to be able to do it in the back of the envelope, right?
I just don't want to do that on the back of the envelope during a public meeting. And give the wrong answer.
If you apply that just to the electrical part, is that the question?
Well, 36 million here, 36 million there. Everybody got.
Everybody a month divided by number of customers, they're probably giving you.
100,000 residential.
Well, but yeah, with the business, you'd have to appropriate it out for.
It depends too, Mr. Chair. A larger portion of that 36 million goes to electric, and then you have some that goes to water wastewater, then you have some that goes to things from natural gas. So you have to portion it out and.
So how's it going the other way? And just, again, we're not, just because it's being recorded, we're not going to quote you on it. What's about what percentage of the GFT comes out of electric?
So of the 30, so this year it's 34 million. So, it's being reduced by 2 million every year. So in fiscal year 22, it was 36 and change. This year it's 34 and change. Of that, probably, I'd say 18 to 20 million is probably out of the electric.
So about how many kilowatt hours a year does GRU use?
We sell to the grid roughly 2 gigawatt hours. A year, so 2 million megawatt hours, multiply that by.
2 gigawatt a year.
I don't know if I've been a city council member and I know about transfers, but as the city trying to recoup some of their costs to having the GRU, or is that all, does 36 million to 34 million just because they want it? That's I don't know. I know that we have golf course fees and water and wastewater fees that we had to recoup. And I know that some of these fees were a little inflated, but I'm just pointing out that maybe the city has some costs that they're trying to recoup.
Yeah, so I mean, so I'm not gonna be able to comprehensively say everything, but about 40% of their revenue is from the GFT. The remaining revenue is either there's some from fire assessment, there are other fees, like you say, golf courses and pools that are a little bit, but mostly it's fire assessment and ad valorem taxes. It's the vast majority of the rest of the revenue. And so, but we are on a track, we're on the third year now of reducing the GFT from 38 million to 36 million and change to 34 million and change. Yeah, it was a commitment to continue to do that over a 5-year period. So you're reducing essentially, or maybe 6 years, you're reducing to 26 million. But each commission has to vote to decide to do that each year. And that reduction, to Eric's point, that reduction every year is allocated out to all the systems, not just electric. So as you reduce that, electric's portion is the majority, you know, it's
Not all out of
yeah, but it's not all out of the electric, it's out of each of the systems. Because there's like an allocation of them paying toward that.
I'm sorry,
And if we were an IOU, a portion of this revenue would end up going back to stockholders too.
people forget about that. And people also, I look at rates all the time. People talk FP&L is one of the really cheap ones. Duke is not cheap. Clay is not. Clay is within 20% of GRU. The differences are nowhere near what people think there. So you said 2 gigawatt hours a year? That's
Roughly 2 million megawatt hours of delivered energy.
2 million megawatt hours. So
Megawatt hours and multiply that.
I think if I got my zeros right, it's a penny.
A gigawatt is, so a gigawatt is 1,000 megawatt hours, so it's 2,000.
So if you get your.
I'm sorry, did I say 2? Yeah, 2,000
2,000 gigawatt hours.
hours. I'm sorry.
But I could be wrong on my pen.
I'd say, it sounds like the zero's wrong.
If you're selling
Three zeros are wrong. Yeah.
kilowatt hour, you reduce it by a penny, you're down almost 10%.
Wait, no, they're selling it at closer to 20 cents. The kilowatt hour. It's closer to 20 cents.
I would like to strongly recommend.
I agree. All right. With that, let's adjourn the meeting.
I think so. I mean, this is something we could bring up sort of what that value is, like even the $2 million reduction. What does that mean? Now, one thing to keep in mind as you march forward, like we're facing right now, rising costs with just about everything we do. Labor, chemicals, material, fuel source to generate power, everything is on the way up. And so it's when you start to have this conversation, it's like, well, okay, so how much can you reduce rates if you reduce $2 million? You can barely keep them flat. There's because costs are rising rapidly right now. So I want to be careful when you're having this conversation. It's not sort of this linear discussion. And then we're also trying to reduce costs in different ways to balance it. So there's a lot of variables going on there, but we could kind of frame a little bit of, how much $1 million means to revenues and what that means from a rate perspective, and kind of give that perspective.
I tell people this, when GRU says lower rates, they're not low, if they have that has nothing to do with the fuel adjustment. So fuel adjustments.
There's rates and there's the fuel adjustment.
Skyrocketed, and so GRU could say, I haven't changed the rates, but your bill went up 20%.
Correct.
And so you have to be careful how people talk, because they hear that and they're like, you guys are buying. That's not.
Yeah, and to give you an example, like I'm going to be close on these numbers, not exactly, but like July of last year, we spent like 5 million plus on fuel to generate power. This July, we spent like 21 million to generate power. That's how much natural gas, the impact of the skyrocketing natural gas had on our ability to generate power. And that is a pass through the fuel adjustment, just like every other utility, kind of similarly. And so that's just been a harsh reality in the power generation world this year. Now, the other part of that is that's 2/3 of our generation is from natural gas. DHR stayed at the same cost it was, which was, half or less than half the cost of where natural gas was. We also, like Eric was just talking today, natural gas is starting to come back down right now. So we're starting to, see that, but in the winter, it's probably gonna go back up. Like these things are volatile and kind of up and down. And so, yeah, nothing is linear in the power industry.
Especially right now.
Especially. So,
Yeah, that Ferrari that's in your budget, it goes up every year.
You mean the general manager?
for the record, there is no Ferrari. Yeah, we are definitely, trying to run as lean as we can, yet still trying to balance reliability and safety and environmental responsibility. I think Eric's role and what he describes is trying to that balance that we've all kind of talked about. How do you keep all of these things? Because we don't want to get to a point where we're, we don't have reliable power. We don't have clean water. Those things are critically important for our community. And so we really, as we talk about these things, we got to be very careful we don't fall below, a certain level of service. That's absolutely essential.
We don't become Texas.
General manager, that is the value.
That is
That is the value you provide, and I don't think you talk enough about it.
good point.
Safety, SAIDI, and those things, what do you call it, need to be talked more about.
Yep, I agree.
That's what's delivered.
I agree.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Guys, have a good night.